Dennis Wise murdered Blue Peter goldfish, held caretakers hostage, and knocked himself unconscious at Kylie Minogue's favourite restaurant. This is the story of the 5'6" Chelsea legend with a lust for violence. Welcome back to The Upshot. My name is Jack Rivlin. Zach Sweeney-Lynch is here.
Hi Jack, how you doing?
Hello, fantastic. And we are joined by our returning guest, Mr. George Wilde.
Hi, thanks for having me. How are we doing?
Listeners will remember him from, I guess, a similar Premier League legend, really, Andy van der Meijden. I guess they're similar figures, really, both Premier League legends. This one a little bit more famous, Dennis Wise.
I think probably for people who were into football in the 90s, a little bit before my time, but I think he was a really big deal then, wasn't he?
Dennis Wise was a massive name in the 90s. He was captain of Chelsea, who were winning a lot of cups. And also he was like a tabloid star. So he was sort of like a Harry Maguire, like Carl Walker-y level. Like a big name. And I guess he kind of captures like a moment of transition for football. As we know, the early 90s football changed more in sort of that era than it had done in the previous sort of 40 maybe. You know, suddenly loads of money going into the game. Footballers are still down the pub at this point. You're still sort of meeting them in the street, but the money's starting to change them. And then in the 90s, suddenly they're doing like Brill cream adverts. And they it's like the transition from like drinking bitter to drinking like a tropical reef. Doing ads for like milk to doing ads for Gillette. Dennis Wise lives in that moment.
Yeah.
He's one of the icons of that moment. All right, should we get into it? Zach,
Yeah.
Take us back to his youth.
Yeah, so Dennis Wise grew up in Shepherd's Bush. Actually went to school with Les Ferdinand. So they became friends because Les was the goalkeeper for their school team before he became a striker. And he was always getting in trouble at school, Dennis. He was like bunking off, getting suspended for fighting. And in 1983, him and Les get caught up in a crime that shocks the nation. So vandals break into the beloved Blue Peter garden and trash it. This was like, I guess, the peak of Blue Peter's social relevance. And we've got a clip actually of the Blue Peter episode where they break to the kids of the nation that the garden has been trashed.
Vandals broke into the Blue Peter garden and caused rather a lot of damage. And one really cruel thing they did was to pour fuel oil into the fish pond. Well, we've drained the pond and we've rescued some of the fish, but a few of them have died, and the oil itself has caused a lot of damage.
The vandals then broke our lovely ornamental urn given to us by Mr. Taylor from Barnet. They then smashed up our sundial and then callously threw it into the pond.
And if that wasn't enough, they then trampled on the bedding plants as well. Well, we hope to repair the damage, and we may even be able to repair the ornamental urn. But it's very sad to think that a few people take such pleasure from harming their fellow human beings and from hurting animals as well.
And here are the survivors. It really is a miracle that they have survived. Brian has come along to give us a bit of advice. Brian, what do you think of them after the awful ordeal that they've been through?
I think they're looking amazingly well.
Well, it's not a pretty sight, is it, what they did, Percy?
You know, people who do this sort of thing must be mentally ill, Janet, mustn't they? Terrible when you come to look at it.
Every single item that is damaged is like so hilariously middle class.
Yeah.
The urn that was made for us.
Ornamental urn, which was donated by a pensioner.
And the chair that my aunt upholstered.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of them then soiled the tapestry. I'd been making an evening classes.
I wonder what happened to the tortoise. Did the tortoise escape?
Yeah.
Tortoise hid, maybe.
Yeah,
on the
because you
shelf.
think that would be...
Target number one.
Maybe it was kidnapped. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Do
speculating.
you think that... Check Les Ferdinand's garden, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's
Been around for 120 years, that tortoise.
Yeah, the tortoise that knew Charles Darwin finally met his end when Dennis Wise jumped the fence. The best bit of that clip is when they go to Percy Thrower, the gardener, and they're like, how are the survivors getting on? He's, some of these people must be mentally ill. He is incandescent with rage.
Yeah. I mean, this was like headline news at the time.
Are we talking front page? I guess.
Yeah, probably.
It was up there with Watergate.
Yeah. Front page of the Beano.
So Les Ferdinand admitted years later in an interview that he had helped people over the wall. He didn't actually admit that he got in there, but he said that he was involved. And he was asked whether Dennis Wise was one of them, and he said, "I can neither confirm nor deny whether Dennis
What
Wise
does what
was
does Dennis say?
Dennis
That means he was there with the fuel, pouring it.
Dennis's representatives have issued a statement saying he was not involved, but
Right, and I for one believe him.
well,
Also, the
no
fact that
smoke
Les,
without fire.
you know, how Les was like, I was giving people lifts over the wall. Do you not think that's a bit of a like? It was Dennis Wise because he's 5'6".
Oh, you think he was getting a little...
Les Ferdinand could probably step over the wall. He's really tall. Dennis Wise would need a leg up.
so.
What a start to the pod. That's an excellent story.
Yeah. Anyway, when Dennis is not smashing up ornamental urns and poisoning goldfish, he's playing a lot of football, really. His football career is kicking off. He gets scouted for England schoolboys when he's about 14, but gets booted off the team after having a food fight with Tony Adams on a train.
That's such a shit thing to...
You're
You're going to play for England, but you had a food fight.
Yeah.
Well, so he gets kicked out of the team.
He gets kicked. Well, so they get scouted along with like a load of other young players, and they're travelling up to Lilleshall,
that used to be
the FA training base, and they've got a trial for who's going to get picked for the schoolboys team. And on the train, him and Tony Adams and a few others start getting a bit rowdy, start chucking food around, play fighting, and another passenger confronts them. He's a headmaster of a school. He's definitely the kind of person that would confront kids. And he then reports it to the FA. I think he sees that they've got like an England badge on their blazers or something, and
Not a Blue Peter badge.
no,
Never getting one of them.
And both of them get kicked off the England team.
Oh, so they can't make it to the trials. That's great.
Yeah. He also, fortunately, though, gets scouted for Southampton around the same time and moves down there when he's 14. And it's not long before he starts getting in trouble there as well. But yeah, he ends up leaving Southampton because he doesn't get on with the manager, and it sort of looks like it's backfiring because he's clubless for a while. He's about 18, living back at home, and it reached the point where he's going to go and sign on the dole. But then a call comes in from Wimbledon, and Wimbledon are in the second division at this point, so they've sort of started their ascent. They're still training in a park. This is sort of the start of the Crazy Gang era, and Dennis sort of fits into this. They have this huge culture of initiations, pranks, getting up to all sorts of mischief. It's kind of the club that's made for him, really. So they do things like they shred their teammates' clothes, rub deep heat in people's underwear, shit in each other's boots.
Got up a notch.
Yeah, that's the lot.
There was one story, I think we told it in the Crazy Gang episode, of a journalist turning up to their training ground and finding the players tying one of their naked teammates to the roof of a car and then driving off down the A3.
How does it go from like tying your bootlaces together?
Yeah, it does escalate.
Unscrewing the lid on the salt to like shitting in their boots.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you came into work one day and I just like shredded your coat? Toughen up, mate.
Yeah. It's just sort of a bonding exercise, really.
Just put deep heat in your boxes.
Yeah. Anyway, Dennis really thrives in this environment. He actually gets off fairly lightly, partly because his parents are friends with the assistant manager.
This is what I don't like about him. Is like on all the Crazy Gang things, he's like, you had to have a backbone or you just disintegrate. Like it was sink or swim. Like, this is all part of it. And then you find out that he didn't get any shit back on him because his parents were protecting him.
Yeah. He also quite quickly became really good friends with Vinnie Jones and John Fashanu, who are the ones you want on your side.
Yeah.
They're sort of the ringleaders of the whole thing. He actually says, Dennis, in his book, in my experience, Vinnie and Fash are two of the nicest people I've ever met.
Right.
Ever. Which, is not the impression that I've had from other accounts of like John Fashanu just like beating up his teammates savagely. Wasn't there one where he like locked them in the boot of a car and like dragged them naked through the snow and then forced them not to eat to not eat for 2 days?
Yeah, he used to sit over them saying you can't eat.
Yeah.
Also the way he describes that was
Lovely lad. Misunderstood.
Yeah.
That is interesting because he seems like a genuine psychopath.
Yeah, I think he's one of the few people we discussed who I'm like, you are a psychopath.
Anyway, so Dennis gets on pretty well with his Wimbledon teammates generally. And when he celebrates his 21st birthday, they're all invited along. He's rented out a church hall, putting on a little disco.
Lovely.
Very nice. It is. It's quite
Simpler
quaint,
times.
really.
Very
yeah.
90s,
Yeah.
yeah.
Imagining like a table with like paper tablecloth.
Yeah, party rings.
Party rings,
Panda
like
pop.
a bowl of what's it?
Maybe like boys on one side, girls on the other.
Yeah, exactly. that's that sort of vibe. And the caretaker of this church hall keeps on coming in through the course of the night. He's like, Dennis, look, it's gone 11 now. Like you said you'd be done by now. And Dennis is like, come on, mate. Like, we'll be done soon. He's like, all right, we'll stay till 12. Keeps on going on. The caretaker keeps on coming in and asking Dennis if he'll finally turn down the music and go home. And eventually, Dennis is like, I've had enough of this. And he leads the caretaker into the back room. He's like, look, yeah, we're wrapping up now. Let me pay you. Leads him into the back room. And in there waiting is a couple of his mates who grab the caretaker. They gaffer tape him to the chair, tape up his mouth, and lock him in the broom cupboard.
Jesus.
And carry on the party.
That is really funny.
For how long was he?
He says in the book that it was just for like another couple of hours, and then
John Fashanu said he actually loved it deep down.
Yeah. No, they said that they like slipped him 50 quid at the end as a thank you, which I don't know, is that
the going rate?
Yeah, I don't know.
That again is quite Beano though.
Yeah,
Although
it is,
in comic books it's kind of funny, but if in real life if that happened to you, it's sort of like quite traumatic.
It's quite terrifying. He never rented out the church hall again. Anyway, all this madness works for Wimbledon though. They get promoted to the first division in 1986. And I think this reputation as nutters has helped them really. Like everybody's afraid to play them. And they really play up to it. So they turn Plough Lane, their home ground, into this hellish fortress. So they had sort of various tricks to make it as inhospitable as possible. So they make the dressing room either incredibly hot or incredibly cold. They disable the flushes on the toilets and then shit in the loos in the dressing room. Even Sam Hammam, the chairman, would get in on the act. So he'd swap in their dressing room. They'd have like a little tea table set up, and Sam Hammam would swap the bowl of sugar for salt. It's all mind games, you know. They'd also make the tunnel out to the pitch black. And when the players were coming through, the Wimbledon players would be waiting, like screaming, banging on the walls. They'd drag players into their dressing room and beat them up.
Right, again, that's the line, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the first ones were actual pranks. Like swapping the salt for the sugar. That's violent assault. It's
Like, to jail for that. Yeah.
You know those classic, like, you know, cling film on the toilet seat, stapler in the jelly, car battery to testicles and electrocute them.
It was all a bit of a giggle, really.
1988, they have their famous FA Cup run. Dennis he really stars in that run. He scores in the semi-final and then sets up the winner against Liverpool in the final. It's really one of football's great fairy tales, Wimbledon. Like they came from the amateur 5th division to win the FA Cup. You know, it's a dark fairy tale.
Yeah, it's one of those sort of German fairy tales where the ugly stepsister is made to like wear iron shoes until she dies.
There's that actual cannibalism.
Yeah. I mean, all fairy
In the
tales
same way
are
that's a
bit
fairy
dark.
tale.
Yeah.
Sort of macabre.
Yeah.
It's a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
They are the Brothers Grimm.
Yeah.
That's obviously the high watermark for the Crazy Gang. And Dennis doesn't stick around for long. He does one more season with Wimbledon, and then Chelsea come knocking. It's kind of the breakup of the Crazy Gang at this point. A lot of them leave. Chelsea pay, I think it's 1.6 million, which is a club record. So he's a big signing. And, you know, the Blues are hoping he'll bring a bit of what made Wimbledon great. You know, that midfield grit, that fearsome reputation. And he certainly does bring the Crazy Gang spirit.
Brilliant.
So Dennis joins at the same time as Andy Townsend, who's now sort of better known as a commentator, I guess. And Andy, he's quite happy about this move. He bagged himself like quite a big pay rise when he joined. And so he splashes out on a convertible car to celebrate, which instantly makes him a target. And Andy says, after like 1 or 2 training sessions, he came back in, put his clothes on, puts his hand in his jacket, and he said, I immediately knew my car keys weren't in my pocket. But he knows what's going on. He said, I didn't want to say anything because then I'd be biting, which apparently eggs on the pranks. So he said, I walked out of the changing room knowing that my car would not be there. And lo and behold, it was gone. I walked towards the gates of the training ground and still didn't see them. And then apparently just outside the training ground, it's like almost farmland. There were like fields with, he said, there it was in a field of cows. It's his convertible car, the roof's down. And as he gets closer, he's like, what's that smell? And Dennis and the gang have filled his car with manure.
Right.
Just like all the way up to the roof. It's just like great.
Again, it's these, we talk about a lot that there are things that happen in the world of football that if that happened in any other workplace, that would just be...
That's why I get the train. So I get the tube in.
I might do it to Zach's bike. Manure. Big old bag of fertiliser. Yeah. To be fair, Dennis brings more than just pranks. He is like a bit of a talisman in midfield. He scores like more than 10 goals every season. He's made captain by Glenn Hoddle once he takes over. And Chelsea then decide to reunite Dennis with his old pal Vinnie Jones. And the pair of them form this pretty fearsome midfield partnership at Chelsea. Which catapults them all the way to the FA Cup final in 1994. So for Vinny and Dennis, this is like a chance to do it all over again. Doesn't quite go to plan. They get smashed 4-0 by Man United in the final. There is one quite funny moment where, so during the match, Dennis bets Eric Cantona £100 that he'll miss a penalty, and Cantona scores.
Obviously, yeah.
Sadly, Vinny is not exactly a good influence elsewhere at Chelsea. So in the summer, after he joins, they go on a pre-season tour to Spain, and Dennis gets into a big old row with the assistant manager, Stan Ternant. So apparently they're like training, and they have to be pulled apart because Dennis is about to swing for him. Anyway, they go back to the team hotel in Spain, and they'd already been warned by the hotel management, like, you've been causing way too much trouble. I think they're just like getting drunk and like doing pranks, you know, shitting in each other's boots. Quite tame stuff.
You know, pulling out people's fingernails with pliers, you know, classic pranks.
Just gradually mentally disintegrating their teammates. Anyway, so the hotel manager said, you're on your final warning. Anyway, they get to dinner, and Dennis and Stan are still going at each other's throats. Dennis just can't resist having a go at him. And after Stan makes one comment, Dennis stands up, tips over the whole dinner table, and storms out of the restaurant. So it's like quite the scene. And Vinny is sent out to calm Dennis down.
Right.
Which
perfect
turns out to be a bit of a mistake, because Vinny goes there to the bar to meet Dennis and sort of just like, look, mate, calm down. But somehow he ends up persuading Dennis actually what he needs to do is get revenge on Stan. And so the pair of them, they go to reception and they pretend one of them Stan and get his room key and his passport. And then they go up to his room and they put every item from his room out on his balcony. Classic sort of.
Yeah, I mean, that's more of a prank.
Yeah, sort of uni sort of type pranks, isn't
Could have
it?
been worse if they'd managed to get hold of some manure.
Yeah, I'm sure Dennis had bigger plans. But anyway, Stan eventually goes to the desk to get his passport because he wants to go and bet in the casino. And they're like, well, what do you mean? We already gave Stan his passport. And so he's like, smells a rat. And he's like, right, I want to be taken up to my room now by the hotel manager and find out what's going on. And they go up there. Stan walks in with the hotel manager and the room is just completely empty. And the hotel manager's just like, get out of our hotel, and kicks them out. Despite Vinny's sort of proclivity for violence and pranks, for some reason he does get put in charge of the Christmas party by Glenn Hoddle.
He's a sort of cool head.
Yeah, you need someone who's, you know, he's got culture vulture. Where will he take them? You know, will it be a quick trip to a gallery, or I don't know, maybe a walking tour of South London? In the end, though, he decides to arrange a pub lock-in where the main attraction is dwarf tossing, which is very those blokes sort of entertainment, isn't it? So one player said the idea was to hurl a dwarf as far as he could. They were surprisingly heavy.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
No one in the Chelsea team seems to really mind. I think they all sort of think it's pretty funny. But Dennis is about to be hit by a major scandal. So Dennis is on a night out in 1994 at Terry Venables' nightclub, Scribes West. It's in Kensington. So
Is this when he was England manager?
Yeah, what I like about this is Terry Venables was England manager and also ran a nightclub, which I was looking it up. It's described as a place where Fleet Street hacks, famous pop stars, and terrifying gangsters like Mad Frankie Fraser would all rub shoulders. Which again, quite sort
Was
of 80s,
Terry
90s.
was Terry in there a lot?
Yeah, apparently every night. So yeah, there was a guy from the Evening Standard was saying it's below their offices, and every night they would bring the like proofs of the paper down before it goes to press, and the editor would look over them with Terry and a bottle of champagne.
Yeah, you can't picture Southgate.
No. But I just love that. It's like they've got gangsters walking around, England manager just hanging out with them. You all right, Frankie? Anyway, Dennis has had this big night out there with this girl he's seeing, and they leave sort of midnight, and they hail a black cab, and they get in, and Dennis wants to be dropped at his house in Shepherd's Bush, and she wants to go to Ealing, and the driver's like, I'm not going to Ealing this time of night, way too far, and they end up having this big argument. At which point they get out of the taxi, and Dennis is still like kicking the cab in anger, hammering on the window. The taxi door's still open, and the driver decides to start driving off just to like get rid of them. The door's still open, and somehow Dennis's date is both knocked to the floor by the open door, and then also somehow she gets caught in the door. So the taxi like starts to drag her along a bit. At which point the guy does stop because he's like, "Fucking hell, this is a bit hairy," and Dennis loses his mind at this point. He jumps back in the taxi. He kicks through the glass partition in the black cab, which I always thought that glass looks quite thick.
Yeah.
Anyway, he kicks through it, shatters it, and then he grabs the driver from behind, like throttling him, and he's just punching him in the face, smashes his glasses. It's pretty wild. Anyway, the old Bill eventually turn up. I think he's arrested. I don't know about the driver as well. Anyway, it's a huge scandal, and Dennis is prosecuted for this assault. Goes to court. Everyone's thinking like, oh, he's probably going to get a fine. This is the same year as the Cantona Kung Fu kick. It's same time. So Cantona Kung Fu kick was the January after. So Dennis is in court after Cantona's things happened. So it's like
30th anniversary.
Yeah,
Is that why we're doing it?
yeah, that's why we're talking about it today. But it's like a wild time for footballers in these scandals. Goes to court. Everyone's sort of thinking, he'll probably get let off with a fine. But he's found guilty by the jury. And the judge sentences him to 3 months in jail. It's quite serious. I would argue adequate.
Do you reckon? I think it's pretty brutal assault, no?
No, I'm saying adequate sentence.
Oh, adequate, yeah.
Yeah. And if, I think also when you bear in mind all the other assaults, pranks he's done.
About time. Anyway, Dennis is sent down to the holding cells. He's there for a few hours on his own, sobbing, he says later. Fortunately, his agent, Eric Hall, is there to support him. Eric Hall is a seriously colourful character. So he was a sort of like celebrity showbiz agent who then got into football. So he'd represented like the Sex Pistols, I think possibly Led Zeppelin as well. And then he drifted into football. And he's kind of credited with being the first agent to like get footballers doing like the magazine covers,
right?
Adverts and stuff, like all the sort of like showbizy stuff. And he's a real sort of like wide boy.
He's kind of like an amalgamation of every Batman villain rolled into one.
He's like something out of Only Fools and Horses, isn't he?
Yeah.
You don't get agents like that anymore.
Not. But he comes just as the Premier League's getting big as well, and like he brings the money, but his type don't exist anymore. I think there might be an episode on him at some point, so I get too into it. But Eric is known for this catchphrase, monster. So he describes everything as monster, meaning like very, so it'll be like, it's monster fun, like that sort of thing. And
now I've only just heard about this man and that catchphrase, but that sounds like it could get grating quite quickly.
Anyway, back in 1995, Dennis has just been sent down. He's sobbing in his holding cell. Eric's there to support him, and you think like, at least he's there. And Eric,
that is a monster sentence.
Funny you say that, because Eric is sent to face the media, and he doesn't miss the opportunity to plug his famous catchphrase. He tells the assembled press pack, "I am monster stunned, monster shocked." It's like, Eric, this isn't the moment to flog a few fucking beer mats with your slogan on it.
Yeah.
Fortunately for Dennis, just 8 minutes before he's due in his Brixton jail cell, his lawyers win a last-minute appeal. Right. And because he's allowed to appeal, they let him out until then. So then, this case then goes to the next court. It's heard by an appeal judge. And on his appeal, the judge doubts that the taxi driver's account can be fully relied upon. So there's basically this suggestion that the cab driver, to try and make things look worse, broke his own glasses at some point. So Dennis Wise admits that he did break the glass and that he punched the guy. But somehow what the taxi driver's evidence is seen as like a little bit shaky.
Is the broken glasses really like a pivotal bit of
Well, I think if someone's
damage?
if
Is
someone's
it damage
faking
to
that, you're like,
property?
can I
Yeah.
trust him? And therefore, the judge decides that it can't be proved beyond reasonable doubt. So he tells Dennis Wise that I'm very reluctantly letting you off. Your behaviour was disgraceful. However, I am clearing you. And actually, the cabbie says afterwards, I never wanted him to go to jail. I just wanted compensation.
Fair enough. All right.
But Dennis is able to focus on securing glory for Chelsea after this, and they really do. So they have this run where they win a lot of silverware. They win the FA Cup in 1997, and then the following year they win the League Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup.
Okay.
Which is Cup Winners' Cup's a big deal. It's kind of hard because it doesn't exist now. It's kind of hard to categorise it.
Was that the European?
Yeah, so it's the winner of your FA Cup in every country, basically,
Right,
the domestic
okay.
cup. But I think if you won the league, you wouldn't play in it because you play in the Champions League.
Yeah. Okay.
So the runner-up would. But it's a big deal. They win the FA Cup again in 2000. So it's a lot of silverware, and he's captain throughout. He's actually Chelsea's most decorated captain until John Terry arrives. So like, he's a true legend of the club. But there is also plenty of madness on the pitch. So there's a game in 97 where he gets into a tunnel scrap with none other than Roy Keane, and Keane is left needing 4 stitches on his head.
Really?
This is at half time as well. So he comes back out
I
with
can see
stitches.
those two not getting on.
Yeah, they're the same type of player, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Midfield hard man, holds grudges.
If I'd had to put money on who would have come out on top,
Roy Keane.
I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I feel like Dennis would fight dirty though.
Yeah.
What,
A lot of like fingernails and
biting.
yeah.
Yeah. In fact, we'll come on to that because the following season, Dennis racks up 4 red cards and 11 yellows in one season. It's pretty impressive. The first red card is in a pre-season friendly. And he's also, on top of those 4 red cards, he is accused of biting a Real Mallorca player in a Cup Winners' Cup match.
Yeah.
The biting
Doesn't
thing
surprise
is.
me.
Yeah, he denies the bite. He says, I was motioning to bite. And UEFA actually accept his argument and don't ban him. So that's on top of the red cards. Also, though, he's like a big grudge holder. So Graham Lasso, his teammate at Chelsea, said he was asked about this season where he got the 4 red cards, because one of them apparently was this game against Villa where like the game was basically over, and then Dennis just randomly flew in with like a late, high, 2-footed tackle. Just like really hideous tackle. And they were like, why? And Graham Lasso said, there's something about a lot of players of that generation and background. It's like a code. If you wronged them, they felt totally justified at any point, no matter how long it took, getting retribution. It might be 6 months, it might be 6 years, but they're never going to let you forget that they owe you one. Which is like the Roy Keane Haaland thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's like, you got me booked for some minor challenge, and therefore I'm going to get revenge.
Yeah. Graham Lasso's too sweet for that world.
Yeah, I think he was quite baffled
Didn't
by
they?
it.
Didn't his teammates used to call him like the professor because he had
Yeah.
A levels and read the Guardian?
And there was no side that Dennis wanted revenge on more than Man United. Obviously, they are the team to beat in this era. They're dominating them. He'd had that scuffle with Roy Keane. He'd had a few others. And the following season, Chelsea have 2 big clashes with Man United. So they have this 0-0 draw at Old Trafford that's really ill-fated. And then in the second half of the season, Chelsea are like 2 points off United, who are leading. So they're in the title race. And United come to Stamford Bridge. And Chelsea win 5-0. It's like a famous win. Everyone thinks the wheels are going off Fergie. And in that game, he has regular scraps with Nicky Butt. Apparently, he's pinching him a lot. And then he leaves. Apparently, it is remembered for the pinching.
Really? I could see that Nicky Butt would be the one that he'd pick on.
Yeah.
As well. He's sort of,
Nicky Butt's a tough guy.
Do you
He's the same
think,
type of
yeah?
player, yeah.
Is he? Yeah.
He's a midfield enforcer.
I feel like he's a bit more gentle than Dennis Wise,
I
though,
think
no?
that was,
Maybe
I mean,
maybe
he
I'm-
was a bit
maybe
more
I'm
gentle than Dennis
misremembering that.
Wise.
Yeah.
But they were, that was the role. It was just like, you recycle possession and you hurt people.
Yeah.
Apparently, he fouled Nicky at one point and then just turns to him and goes, "That hurt, didn't it, you little ginger bastard?" So it's just like, it's just menacing shit. And after that game, Alex Ferguson said of Dennis Wise, he could start a fight in an empty room. So his reputation at this point is like head case. And there was one more great drama coming up when his old club Wimbledon come to Stamford Bridge. And obviously, you know, this carries a bit of extra bite for Dennis, and he decides to prepare a special welcome for them. It's a pretty ill-tempered game. He's regularly scrapping with Wimbledon defender Kenny Cunningham. And after the game, he waits in the tunnel for Kenny. And it starts off sort of playfully, squirts some juice in his face.
Right. If I know the pattern, that comes right before like he attacks him with a sort of crowbar.
Yeah. Bit of umbungo in the eyes, and then it gets serious. It does. A full-on brawl breaks out. The Wimbledon manager gets his glasses broken.
Or does he?
Yeah. Faked it.
Or did he do that?
We
in
got
the
another
back
glasses
room? Yeah.
faker. You and that cabbie. And actually, Gianluca Vialli, who's Chelsea manager by this point, he ends up with a black eye. He gives him a post-match interview with one, apparently. It's come up quickly. Yeah, apparently no one really knows what's going on. Kenny Cunningham says, the last thing I remember was having juice squirted in my eyes. And next thing, I'm in the sort of like doorway of the Chelsea dressing room, and my teammates, Mick Harford and one of the others, are standing over me, protecting me. Sort of like Roman tortoise shell. It's mental. You're probably wondering, given this fruitful career, why did Dennis not play more for England? Because he was as I said, he was a major player.
Okay.
So he plays for England 26 times. He scores on his debut in 1991.
Okay.
But then he's on the fringes with Terry Venables' squad. He trains with them before Euro 96, which is his involvement's largely remembered for when Gaza shreds Dennis's Armani suit. So a good bit of revenge there. There's a lot of sort of pranking going on, but he's expected to go to Euro 96, doesn't make it. And then he only real run he gets is when Kevin Keegan's manager in Euro 2000, he plays all 3 group games as England are knocked out.
Right.
But it's a bit of a like sort of Owen Hargreaves type England career, you know, like never quite gets the run, but that's probably about right. They're better players.
Wow.
And so, given that he's mostly confined to club appearances, and as he's sort of entering the autumn of his years at Chelsea, Dennis's attention, you know, naturally, as it does as you get older, it turns to sort of like, how can I pass the torch to the younger generation? And he comes across the perfect protege, none other than John Terry.
Right.
So John Terry makes his debut when he's 17 in a game in which Dennis Wise is sent off, of course. So he gets an early flavour of what Dennis is about.
Do you think Dennis did that on purpose just to show him?
Yeah, that is what football's all about. Anyway, actually, to be fair, I think Terry had a pretty good idea of what Wise was all about, because when John was in the academy, Dennis Wise was like the guy he looked up to like a god. And Dennis...
That tells you everything you need to know about John Terry and
the rest
Dennis
is
Wise.
history.
Yeah.
But I think Dennis sort of exploited this relationship, because apparently he used to just like make John do like errands and shit for him, like make him tea or whatever. But one of them was that if Dennis needed a shit, he would send John Terry in 10 minutes before to warm up the new suit for him. Which I thought was the sort of shit that went down at like boarding schools.
Yeah, that is...
I don't think John sort of remembers it quite fondly. You know, like in Four Weddings, that guy's like, yeah, I went to Eton with his brother, buggered me senseless, but taught me a thing or two about life. And it's that sort of like weird Stockholm syndrome relationship. And then when John does get into the first team, Dennis is there to just make sure he keeps his feet on the ground. So apparently shortly after signing his first senior contract, John lands this big bonus as part of it. And he decides, I'm going to splash out on a brand new car.
So I hope it's not convertible.
Turns up for training in his brand new sports car. Don't know if it is a convertible. And Dennis presumably can't get his hands on any fertiliser at short notice, because he goes a bit more Route 1 this time. He just, in front of the whole team, picks John up off the floor by his throat, holds him up against the wall, and he's like, who the fuck do you think you are? Sell that car now. And I think he does. Just go and sell the car.
Well, maybe the arrival of flashy players like John Terry puts Dennis off Chelsea, because in 2001 he leaves after 11 years there. So he's a Chelsea legend, really. When he leaves, he's their 4th most capped player of all time. And yeah, like you said, he's still now their 2nd most successful captain after John Terry.
He's a big name, guys.
After that, he joins Leicester, who are sort of struggling in the Premier League, bottom half team, and it turns into an absolute disaster. So 3 days after signing, Dennis already has to make a difficult call to his new manager, and he warns him that there is a story coming out in the press. So basically, Dennis had been out on the lash with some of his mates in Chelsea, and they'd ended up at this fish restaurant. It's quite like a flashy place. It was apparently Kylie Minogue and Mel B's favourite restaurant.
Love that.
And anyway, they're pretty pissed by the time they get in there. So the tabloids track down one of the diners, and the diner says, I've seen Dennis there before, but I've never seen him that drunk. I've never seen anyone that drunk.
He called up his manager and said that you're going to hear some stories, but Kylie Minogue smashed her own glasses.
Didn't touch him, yeah. So it carries on. The witness said ex-Chelsea captain Wise, who has just joined Leicester, swayed to the bar with his friends where they talked very loudly about oral sex.
Oh, God.
Anyway, Dennis and his mates are there at the bar, like necking lager, necking champagne. And Dennis eventually has too much and stumbles into the bathroom, kicks open the door of one of the cubicles and throws up all over the toilet. He's like kind of staggering around, like trying to get it in the bowl. Eventually slips over, bangs his head on the toilet bowl and knocks himself unconscious. So the toilet cubicle door was open already. All these other people in the toilet's just like, oh my God, is that Dennis Wise? And yeah, he's unconscious on the floor of the toilet, blood coming out of his head. They have to call paramedics in and he gets carted out of the restaurant in a neck brace.
God, I would love to be there for that.
Yeah. And yeah, this is like 3 days after he signed for Leicester. And it doesn't get much better on the pitch for him. So Leicester have a really terrible season. As Christmas comes around, they're a place off the bottom of the table, and his teammates are getting pretty sick of him. So they have their Christmas party, and they do a sort of Secret Santa thing. Dennis, he actually doesn't even get Robbie Savage in the Secret Santa, but he decides anyway that he's gonna get a little gift for him.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
It's sort of sweet. He gets him a teddy wearing a Leicester shirt that has been impaled on a dildo.
What does it mean?
So apparently Robbie Savage had been having a pretty bad season, and Dennis gives him this gift and says, "Take this because you're the only prick in a Leicester shirt at the moment."
Right. So
Sure
the prick
exactly
is in
what
a
that
Leicester shirt, sort of.
Okay, that's it. Yeah, I was
Mate.
The prick is the dildo.
right. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
tenuous.
Yeah, if you have to explain it.
But also, like, he's not got Robbie Savage in the drawer.
No.
He's decided, I'm getting him one anyway. I'm going presumably to the club shop
Teddy in the shirt.
and then to like a sex shop as well. He's had to make like 3 different trips.
And then he's got to impale it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Probably
assemble it. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's sort of Blue
Premeditated.
Peter levels of DIY toys, isn't it? Good to see he's learned
Here's one,
something.
here's one I made earlier. So he gives Robbie this teddy bear impaled on a dildo, and obviously it doesn't go down too well with Robbie. Robbie squares up to him. Robbie makes a sort of joke about so Leicester's manager at the time used to manage Wimbledon, and Robbie sort of puts on a Dennis Wise voice, and he's like, "Oh, it's not Dennis Wise's voice. I'm Dennis Wise. I'm gonna pick the team with you, boss." And Wise then responds by making a sort of lewd joke about Robbie Savage's girlfriend, and they're like properly squaring up to each other in some restaurant for the Christmas party. Teammates have to drag them apart, and it's not good vibe. It's not what you want from your Christmas party. They're hoping to sort of bring a bit of team spirit together for the rest of the season, and it doesn't work. The season goes from bad to worse for Leicester. They finish bottom of the table and they're relegated. So over the summer, in a belated bid to resurrect some good vibes in the dressing room, the Leicester management decided to take the squad on a pre-season trip over the summer to Finland. Lovely Finland. A bit of training, do some saunas, maybe see the Northern Lights if they're lucky. Unfortunately, though, the good vibes don't last long. So they're staying at this nice hotel, and one night Dennis is playing cards with some of his Leicester teammates in the hotel bar, and they get into a bit of an argument. He's arguing particular with Callum Davidson. He's one of the other Leicester players. They've had some dispute over the game, and Dennis decides to resolve this dispute by punching Callum in the face. And it's a serious punch. He breaks Callum's nose and his jaw. Dennis breaks a bone in his hand as well. And understandably, all of their Leicester teammates are pretty horrified by this. Dennis gets sent home from the camp, banned from training, and a week later, Leicester announced that they've sacked him, which, I think, personally, I'd say that's fair enough if you've broken one of your colleagues' jaw. But Dennis doesn't agree. He brands it a disgrace and threatens to sue the club for £2 million, which is his lost salary. But there's this huge row that kicks off. Dennis starts getting death threats from fans. And worst of all, his sponsors start abandoning him. So at the time, Dennis was doing adverts for Sugar Puffs.
He was the face of Sugar Puffs.
He was the face of
Well,
Sugar
the Honey
Puffs.
Monster was the face of Sugar
Yeah,
Puffs.
so they were doing adverts together.
Where sort
him
of
and-
what
him and the
Dennis
Honey
Wise
Monster.
like shits in his cereal bowl.
Honey Monster makes a tame gag and Dennis just headbutts him. Fuck off, you little cunt.
Yeah.
But it was sort of a thing where they were sort of like enemies, but it was quite good natured.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
I think
bizarre.
actually in the advert, the Honey Monster sort of mugs off Dennis. So in the advert, the Honey Monster is also a footballer, and at the end of the game, they swap shirts, and the Honey Monster gets Dennis's quite small shirt, and it's sort of like this size.
He's quite good at laughing
so-
about his own size, Dennis.
Yeah,
Not the Honey Monster, he can't take it.
yeah. But the Honey Monster is forced to make a statement on the event. Well, the Honey Monster does it through its employers. So the BBC article at the time said a Quaker Oats spokesman told the BBC Sport Online, "We cannot and should not comment on this particular incident."
Right.
Yeah.
But implied within that is that the Honey Monster is as horrified as everybody else that his co-star has undertaken this horrible act
Honey
of
Monster's
violence.
silence is deafening.
Yeah. So after such a heinous incident, you might be wondering what kind of a club would offer Dennis a deal. And not exactly confounding the stereotypes, Millwall pop up with a contract for him. So at the time, the chairman of Millwall is the lingerie magnate turned Dragon's Den star Theo Paphitis.
Some great cameos in this
Yeah.
episode.
Theo Paphitis, obviously, he goes on to become pretty big household name through Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
He does get into a bit of trouble later when he says that women's brains turn to mush after they have kids.
Jesus.
Anyway, so Dennis signs for Millwall initially as a player, but then halfway through the season, he becomes player manager. And he does really well. So Millwall have this amazing FA Cup run, get to the final against Man United, which would have been a great story. It's a bit of symmetry, really, with his run to the final with Wimbledon, like big underdog story. Arguably, that would have been even bigger, really, because Millwall were championship at the time. Sadly, they lose 3-0, though. Dennis plays the whole match, or he plays and he subs himself off in the 89th minute. They lose 3-0. Cristiano Ronaldo scores 1 and Van Nistelrooy gets 2.
That's quite a big feat. Do they get into Europe then? Because
They qualified for the qualifying rounds of the UEFA
yeah.
Cup and they lost to Ferencvaros,
Ferencvaros,
the Hungarian team. It's just sad. Millwall in the UEFA Cup would have been brilliant.
those away trips.
Yeah, God, it's maybe fortunate that they did. Anyway, he does another season at Millwall and then leaves, does spells at Southampton and Coventry.
Southampton had him back, did they?
They did, yeah. Also as player manager briefly. Weirdly, the manager who signed him for Coventry, Mickey Adams, had also been in charge at Leicester when Dennis had broken his teammate's jaw.
So he doesn't mind.
He didn't
He,
mind, yeah.
he knows a good prank when he sees one.
Bygones
Yeah.
be bygones.
Yeah.
And that's basically the end, isn't
That's the end of his playing career.
it? So yeah, he plays till he's 40. It's quite. But I guess he's
Yeah.
player manager
Yeah.
and a pretty good one, I think. I mean, those results
Yeah.
are pretty good.
Yeah.
And then, he's thinking about his next move. First of all, he decides to get married in 2004. His best man is, of course, Vinnie Jones.
Who else?
I absolutely dread to think what the stag was like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, playing a lot of the old hits, I can imagine. And then he takes a job managing Leeds, which, sounds like quite a good gig, but this is when Leeds were in a proper state. So they sort of 4 years earlier they'd been in a Champions League semi-final, and now they find themselves at the bottom of the championship when Dennis takes over. They've had a 10-point deduction. They're about to drift into administration. It's a complete mess. Dennis can't save them from relegation in the first season, but in the second season he actually does quite well. So by January of the second season, they've had 15 points deducted, but they're still third in League
Wow,
One.
that's
But still, he's
impressive, yeah.
doing pretty well. I think he's generally considered quite a good manager. So it's a huge shock that January when he makes the unexpected move to become an executive director at Newcastle. So he just leaves management behind. Apparently he'd met Mike Ashley and they'd sort of
Yeah, I
seen a
could see-
kindred spirit in each other. And Mike Ashley had been like, you should come and work for me. And that was, that's sort of how Mike Ashley hired people. Because one of Dennis's new colleagues at the time was Derek Lambias, was one of the other directors. And apparently Ashley had hired him because he was running his favourite casino. It's like, hey, you can run a football club. It was that vibe. And Derek, Dennis and a few others become part of what's known as the Cockney Mafia at Newcastle. Although at the point where Dennis joins, they're still very optimistic. Mike Ashley arrives and he's this sort of beer-swilling billionaire man of the people. The fans all love him. And Dennis Wise, they're like, he seems to have done quite a good job at Millwall and Leeds. Maybe this will work. One man who's not happy is new manager Kevin Keegan, who'd basically joined about 2 weeks earlier on the understanding he wouldn't have a sporting director. And then Ashley just unveils like 4 different people above him. And it doesn't take long for Keegan to fall out with Dennis Wise. So on the morning of a big game against Arsenal, Kevin's like, trying to prepare his team when he gets a phone call from Dennis. And he's like, Kevin, we're signing a guy called Nacho Gonzalez. And Kevin's like, whoa. I thought we agreed no transfers without my agreement. And Dennis is like, yeah, but just, he's good, trust me. And Kevin's like, well, who is he? And Keegan Googles him, and there's nothing on Google about this player. And Dennis is like, oh yeah, check YouTube. So Keegan goes on YouTube, and Kevin says in his book, it was literally like a grainy clip of a guy playing in a park. It's like filmed on a Motorola Razor. And Dennis is like, yeah, we're getting him on loan for a season, and we're buying this guy Cisco for $6 million. And Kevin's like, well, who's seen him play? And it turns out no one at the club has seen either of these guys playing. And eventually Dennis admits to Kevin that they're just signing these two as a favour to these 2 South American agents. So these agents had like got them Colaccini and Gutierrez, who'd worked out really well. And Dennis is like, look, just bring them in. You don't even have to play them. They'll train with the academy. And Kevin Keegan's like, what the fuck? Anyway.
£6 million, like.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Does Cisco turns out all right though?
No.
Is he not?
No.
He does remember him
4.5 years, plays like 11 games or something. It's a bit of a disaster. Anyway, Kevin's still got to prepare Newcastle to play Arsenal. They go on to lose 3-0 that day. And the match is mostly remembered for the moment where the camera's cut to Mike Ashley in the stands and he necks his pint, which obviously becomes the iconic Mike Ashley image. At which point Kevin Keegan's like, what the fuck is going on? Why am I here?
Yeah.
This ain't great. Kevin eventually quits and he then sues Newcastle, claims that it was like constructive dismissal. And one of the big issues in it is this like ridiculous transfer saga. And Dennis is called to give evidence in the trial. And they asked Dennis, like, is this sort of thing common in football? And in it, Dennis admits that when he was at Leeds, he signed the 17-year-old because the 17-year-old's dad was the owner of a local business and the chairman wanted him to sponsor the club. So, it doesn't come out of it great. That season, Newcastle are relegated and Dennis Wise ends up quitting. He later says that he basically wrecks his reputation with that spell, which I think is probably true. And then he goes into sort of your classic footballing, post-football wilderness, does a bit of punditry. 2017, he goes on I'm a Celeb.
Of course.
But apparently he becomes good mates with Amir Khan and Rebecca Vardy during that series. And he and Rebecca later release a Skittles vodka called Skittle. SK-TL.
So this is like industrially made skill.
Yeah, so
are they just
Jamie
making
Vardy,
it? Are they making it the traditional methods?
Yeah, because Jamie Vardy was known for making his own Skittles vodka,
Yeah.
right?
Okay,
so I think they see a business opportunity.
Are Skittles involved in this? at all?
No,
Is
so
it
I think
very-
that's why it's called Skittle. It's like a
So
rip-off.
it's SKTL.
Yeah, but have a look at the website because the website's got
trashy.
this like footage and it's like Becky Vardy in a sweet shop. Sort of like, you know how you see like this sort of like, you know, the wine growers, it's them like in the vineyard, like snipping grapes and like sampling the soil. It's her with like jars of pick and mix. Dennis isn't the last of his family to reach reality TV fame. His daughter goes on Love Island. But then he does actually return to football in a pretty big gig. So he's appointed a consultant and then later CEO at Como. So Como are like they're sort of a small club on Lake Como near Milan who then get taken over by this consortium, including Cesc Fabregas, Thierry Henry.
Yeah, I was going to say, because he's managing them.
Yeah. And now they actually, Dennis basically guides them from the 4th tier to Serie A. He resigned last summer, so he hasn't been there while they're in Serie A, but pretty good.
He's actually got a decent record.
Yeah, he
in,
does.
Like management and boardroom roles apart from Newcastle.
Yeah. But actually, the majority owner of that club are an Indonesian cigarette conglomerate.
Yeah, it just so happens that the CEO's son is really good at football. Happy coincidence.
And actually, the cigarette company get him to do the odd bit of like community work in Indonesia. And there's this like Copper 90 video series where Dennis is brought in to G up this Indonesian youth team, I guess in Jakarta. And it's sort of like, you know, he's brought into the dressing room to give them a few inspiring words and sort of get the next generation thinking about their game. here he is delivering his rousing team talks.
Fajak, the left winger, he's taking piss out of you.
Put him in that fucking row over there. You have my permission to put them 2 fuckers over there. He's got 3 fucking goals. 3 goals. He disrespects you. You want to see if he does it now, the little flip-flap and all the little what's the name, you fucking idiot. Yeah? You make him know, yeah?
I love their just blank expressions. They all look like quite sweet, and they're just...
Yeah, you put him in that fucking row over there. It's just like not the appropriate level of aggression for like a youth game.
Yeah.
Also, I like that he's slightly doing the Englishman talking to a cab driver abroad accent.
Yeah.
You know, it's like he's slightly making himself sound a bit of a foreign accent, but still talking
Steve
like...
McLaren approach.
Yeah.
Also, I'm pretty sure the 2 players he's talking about are sitting in the room together. He's like, put him over there. Yeah, it's charming. And that's basically the story. As I said, Dennis stepped down from Como in the summer, so he is available if any sort of Indonesian youth sides
Motivational speaking and...
Yeah, maybe he could come and give a sort of team talk to a struggling paper merchant or something. He does. Do you know what I will say? He has got some charisma.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think he's that, he is, like you said at the start, a bit of a cheeky chappy.
Yeah, he's got a glimmer in the eye. He is a bit funny. His form of aggression has a bit of like Lock, Stock style charm. What job can you see him doing? Do you think he'll get another role running a club? I would like that in English football.
Yeah, I mean, he's done pretty well whenever he has done that. I can see him.
I wouldn't want him at my club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you have him at Fulham?
Sort you right out.
You know what? I would.
I think in a club in like the 3rd tier who are like ambitious, do a Como. I think he's the missing ingredient for Wrexham. Yeah. Okay. Final question: is he a cunt?
You know what? Over the course of this episode, I've actually warmed to him quite a lot. There are. Well, I say that, then you do remember the times. That
Just like if I made a joke, at him that was
colleagues.
quite gentle, would he break my jaw?
Yeah.
Or is it more like these rows like build, and actually the other person is like saying more than just a joke?
I feel like it's also like because people just tend to mellow as they get older, right? So you see him on sort of I'm a celeb.
Yeah.
And you kind of warm to him, but then
okay, but was he a cunt like at the point at which he retired?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so. I think he was like that sort of cocky little shit that you'd have at school who was always just like constantly talking back, getting into little scraps, just like being a bit of a bully.
Would you want to be on his team? Yeah.
I'd prefer to be on his team than against it.
Yeah. All right. But hopefully I've persuaded you that he is a true Premier League legend.
Oh, legend.
Yep.
When's part 2?
No question. All right, thanks a lot. Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you.
And thanks a lot for listening.